Stream Q&A part 1 of 2 that we have every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, getting a little bit of a late start, but for the next hour or so I will be answering all of your questions related to history and social studies. Get your questions about history and social studies answered by a historian here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Get your weekend started the right way, stay for the good vibes, like and subscribe to become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. It's as easy as that. Do a super chat, become a member, join our community and all of that stuff to help grow the channel and everything. So yes, for the next hour or so, I'll be answering all of your questions related to social studies as I do every Friday and Saturday here at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then after this, we're going to be going over to Instagram for a little bit at 7 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you guys can join us there. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Check out my long form videos that drop every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and my shorts that are on the channel all the time. We are here on Instagram. We are on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on X, and of course, we are also on TikTok. You can get exclusive content on TikTok that you can't get here, and exclusive content here that you can't get on TikTok. So please, including these live streams. So please like the feed, subscribe for more. There's always a bunch of great stuff here happening at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So if you like history and social studies, you are in the right place. Get your weekend started by getting all of your questions about history answered here with the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and with History Hefner, who is not in his smoking jacket today, but I will be probably returning to that once the summer's over. However, we are starting off formal wear. So there's formal wear on the channel. A bunch of the videos and shorts are now me in a nice shirt or a tie or both or something like that. So you've got formal wear, Friendly Neighborhood History for your live streams this weekend. I think you all will really enjoy it. So yes, please, again, like and subscribe. If you haven't already, and drop a topic or a comment or a question that you would like answered about history and social studies in the chat. I hope you're all having a wonderful Friday and that you have a great weekend. Gaiahan is asking, good to see you. Rodolfo is also here, my moderator. Gaihan's asking, thoughts on dating events BC AD versus the seemingly more modern derogatory BCE and CE. The reason I typically use BC and AD, although I'll use both sometimes, the reason I usually use BC, before Christ, and AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, is only because the BCE, CE politically correct is delineated, usage is delineated on the same exact years as BC and AD. There's no different combination or different start of the year. It's just still oriented around the change of BC to AD, and it's just a way to whitewash old religious terminology. Since our way of dating the years since the ancient times come from the Romans and then come from our Western world, and that Western world was heavily influenced by the church, there's nothing wrong with saying BC or AD. I will use BCE or CE from time to time, but BC and AD are more traditional, they're more historical, and also BCE and CE are based on the same time, so it really doesn't make a difference. It's just a way to be nice, I guess, or more inclusive or something like that. But I prefer BC and AD. Besides, I think they're more historical, like I said. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and to our live stream Q&A. Ask me anything about history and social studies that we do every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. So you're here for part 1. If you have a comment, question, or topic you'd like to discuss surrounding social studies, drop it in the chat and I'll be happy to answer. I don't speak Hindi. I respect those that do. It's a wonderful language. The language of the vast majority of the people in the Indian subcontinent. Neil deGrasse Tyson says BC AD because of all the scientific discoveries made by the church. That's a fair one. Calvin and Hobbes, I've heard him say that before. Pope Gregory is the one who came up with a very exacting calendar and, of course, oriented the BC and AD that we use now. So, yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. The church actually built the modern calendar, so there is nothing wrong with using church terminology to focus and orient our years around those things, especially when BCE and CE are not oriented on anything else other than the same years for BC and AD. So I don't have a problem with it at all. I don't know what they mean. I don't know what the sentences are going to say, so I'm not going to say a prompted script. A prompted script, sorry. So yeah. Anyways. Hope you're enjoying your weekend or the very start of it. I'm glad you're joining us here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. If you have a comment, question, or topic related to history or social studies, drop it in the chat and I'll be happy to answer it. Harry, thank you for joining us, my moderator. It's all right. Good to see you. Thank you for dropping in and saying hi, liking the live and all of that stuff. So who has questions about history and social studies they want answered? Okay, I don't know what that means. So treat, I'm not going to say because I don't know what it means. Anyways, other people have any topics, questions about history or social studies they want to ask. We'll be going for about another 55 minutes or so. So anyone have a question about history or social studies, please be sure to ask it. We've been doing these live streams for just over a year. The channel's been going on for a year and a half now, and we're nearing 10,000 members, for 10,000 friendly neighborhood historians. So if you want to become a friendly neighborhood historian, just like and subscribe, and it's easy as that. What was North Africa like before the spread of Islam and Arabs? Were North Africans originally more related to their Greek and Roman neighbors? There was definitely a lot of connections, especially in the northeastern part of Africa, to the church and to the Byzantine Empire, which controlled Egypt until the Muslims conquered it. Northwestern Africa had been conquered by the Vandals, who overthrew the Romans who had been there. There were various. It was a very tribal society, very different peoples who practiced different religions and had different beliefs. The Berbers in Northwest Africa were well known as very fierce and strong warriors that were very difficult to control and to conquer. The Muslims had issues with them as well. So there's that. What can you say about the historical Jesus as a historian? So the idea that Jesus of Nazareth did not live is total hogwash. I don't understand why anyone would believe it. Anyone who believes that is just telling you how religiously biased they are, not that they actually believe anything about history. Jesus clearly lived and existed. He's well attested to by historians of that time, both secular and Christian. Jesus was a Jewish leader, a rabbi who taught a particular set of ethics and values that were later written down by his followers within a century after his life and death, which is pretty remarkable for that time period. His followers claimed that he died. Most people could agree that he died on the cross, and his followers believe that he was. His followers believe that he rose from the dead. So that's kind of the general outline of what you can say historically about the historical Jesus, Calvin and Hobbes. Otter, good to see you as always. Otter's a longtime friendly neighborhood historian, so is Gayahan. What was the development of Hinduism like? And more specifically, was Buddha a Hindi monk? How did that spread across Asia? So Hinduism is one of the most ancient religions in the world, if not the most ancient religion in the world. It got its final scripts in the Vedic period between about 1500 and 500 BC under the Indo-Aryans who conquered the Indian subcontinent, but it had pre-existed. It's written, like many religions and cultural ideas, had pre-existed its documentation by maybe a couple of millennia even. The ancient Indus River people had the rudimentary ideas of Hinduism laid out. You can go check out my full-length video on the Varna system and Hinduism and the origins of Hinduism to learn more about this. But basically, Buddhism was a derivative, an answer to Hinduism, to the life cycle of suffering and death that many people found objectionable in Hinduism. And of course, it was developed by Siddhartha Gautama, whose historical existence is a little bit more debatable than the aforementioned Jesus of Nazareth. However, he was supposedly an Indian prince who became enlightened under the Bodhi tree and preached a message of sacrifice and trying to eliminate suffering by being at peace with everything, by being at one with nature. And he felt that this was an answer to the cyclical problems in Buddhism, in Hinduism. So, yeah. So anyways, in all likelihood, Buddha did exist. So, there we go. And Buddhism kind of spreads as an answer. It becomes really popular in China and Japan. Develops different forms of Buddhism. Does it really matter, sir, when we have learned nothing? What do you mean? What have you not learned? I mean, maybe you haven't learned anything. I've learned plenty, and anyone who's listening has probably learned a few things they didn't know in just the last few minutes. So there's that. So yeah. Does anyone have a topic about history, a question they would like to ask? Drop it in the chat. And yeah, welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Thank you for joining us on our Friday Q&A, Ask Me Anything, where you can ask me anything you would like about history and social studies. Hold on a second. Okay, I don't know what happened there. I was having some technical issues. So does it really matter when we have learned nothing? Again, you have not learned anything, but I've learned plenty. Religion is fascinating. I need to research more about Shinto. The ancient ancestor worship religion of Japan, extraordinarily popular. Could you go over Alexander the Great siege of Tyre? Basically, Tyre was kind of on an island and it was hard to access, so Alexander built a ramp across and up towards the city, and his troops were able to actually besiege the city that way. It was almost impenetrable otherwise, but Alexander's basic tactics, his ability to keep his soldiers well defended while building a causeway and a siege tower was extraordinarily effective. It's one of his greatest moments. So, what is the real reason behind America upset with India when many countries are buying oil and gas from Russia? Because India is only increasing its amount that it's buying from Russia. That's the ostensible reason. The whole fear of India is that India will grow closer to Russia and China, and so the United States wants to disincentivize that, and it's decided to use stick rather than carrot and punish India for continually buying a large amount of its oil and gas from Russia. So. And the truth is, it's a much higher percentage than any of the European countries, which the United States has a much better relationship with and are not necessarily allies with Russia. So that's a huge reason why. The BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa geopolitical arrangement that the Americans really are leery of is another reason they want to keep India separated from Russia and China. I've answered this before, Captain India. Would you agree with this statement? Borders divide good ideas from bad ones? Borders? Not necessarily. Are you aware of the ascension problem right now with the Japanese imperial family? The current emperor only has a daughter, so it's debated if she becomes empress or if it passes to her uncle instead. I haven't heard about that, but that's not surprising. It was a patrilineal society in many, many ways. Yeah, Indians. Oh, jeez, poor love. Do you really have to ruin everyone's life by saying stuff? Didn't you get banned from Josh's stream? Yes, that was totally me. Yes, just pick on the white guy in a tie. India is going with China, BRICS. Yeah, that's a real geopolitical concern for the Americans because BRICS wants to develop its own currency. You already have the euro, the development of a BRIC, but again, European nations are generally considered to be more hegemonically influenced by the United States and part of America's sphere of influence, more like allies than enemies. India has been Modi has been relatively sympathetic to President Trump because they're both nationalists trying to bring their countries to a new level. However, their nationalism has clashed because the Americans have demands geopolitically that it doesn't match with the Indians' nationalist demands. So there you go. So yeah, I'm not selling anything. This is just the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And yes, thank you. It is a nice tie. This is our Q&A where you can ask me anything about history and social studies. John Bolton was I think he was the UN ambassador under George W. Bush, and he was Trump's national security advisor the first time around. He was supposedly holding on to classified documents, supposedly, so the FBI raided his home earlier today. A lot of people are wondering when the Trump administration would start cracking down on political opponents through a lot of issues related to classified materials, and the Russia collusion narrative and all of that stuff, and so people are starting to crack down on that, I guess. But a lot of people see this as an overreach and a way to punish political enemies. Bolton became an outspoken critic of President Trump after his time working with him. India doesn't have an option. India is surrounded by major global powers that would take India if India didn't align with them. Possibly, I don't know. I think the United States would rather be that partner. So, was Uncle Sam a real person? Japanese here. Okay, yes, thank you for joining us from Japan. That's amazing if you're from Japan. Yes, Uncle Sam was a real person. I'm trying to remember his last name, but he was known as Sam, and he helped pack meat and ship it to the soldiers during the War of 1812. And his name wasn't Sam, but he was nicknamed Uncle Sam. Either his name was Sam and he was nicknamed Uncle Sam, or his name wasn't. I'm not 100% sure, but he helped actually provide meat in barrels with the initials US or Uncle Sam, I think. Am I getting that mixed up with something else? I think it would say from your Uncle Sam. And because of that, the legend spread. He was a real man. He didn't dress quite like Uncle Sam that we know did. That became more of a symbol for American patriotism. Uncle Sam existed as early as the 1830s and 40s in newspapers and political cartoons. And then, of course, became extraordinarily famous for the I Want You image in the beginning of the Second World War, or the Great War in 1917, when it became a propaganda piece to encourage American soldiers to go off and fight, by you having Uncle Sam, your representative, a personification of America, of patriotism, of all of that, doing its pointing at you and asking you to join it. No, I'm not Anakin. I am Patrick. But let's see. What's your biggest regret in life? Not asking you to subscribe sooner. Was that to get rid of any information Trump didn't like? I don't know yet. We'll see. Who really is America's greatest ally? Who is it right now in our modern era, and who would historically be our greatest ally? France, maybe. Great Britain? Yes, because now, but not historically, no. Israel. It's tough. I would say you got France, Israel, Britain. Those are some of the biggest allies in U.S. history, just ostensibly from American foreign policy. The British have kind of eclipsed the French because of they're an Angloid country. They share the same language, culture, and tradition and political tradition. So I believe I'd have to say Britain is America's greatest ally. So hello, Faraz. Thank you for joining us. History gets written by winners. Guess who's been winning wars? Yes, America. Thank you for reminding us. Yeah, no, Charlie. You can shout them out yourself. Let me see here. It's hard when I do not have moderators handling the chat. History isn't subjective. Our interpretations of it are. Hello, mine. Good to see you. The I Want You. Yes. Did you know I'm super proud to be Iranian? As you should, Faraz. There's an incredible history in Iran. Charlie, you should go to a doctor. Show Adam Driver some respect? No. Elaborate on my theory. Yes, your idea is that history is basically written by the victors. This has happened in many occasions where indeed the victors were able to get to the history before because they were successful. However, I tend to think that it's the interpretation and how we understand historical figures and historical events that's really dominated by the winners of those conflicts, not necessarily the historical facts. France got the nukes. Yeah, whatever. What wars did we win besides World War II? You mean by what wars did we win? You mean by the United States? I mean, both world wars in the 20th century. The First World War in the 1750s, you could count as an American victory. The Civil War, the United States defeated a rebel power. The Spanish-American War, the Mexican-American War, the Black Hawk Wars, almost every war against the Native Americans. I mean, whether you like the war or not, whether it was justified or not, America does have a good habit of winning wars. The Korean War was a stalemate, but the Korean War started because of an invasion by the North Koreans against the South that was repelled thanks to the Americans and allowed South Korea to remain independent as it had before the war. So although it's technically a stalemate, I would say that's more of an American victory. Obviously, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan were some big losses. Desert Storm, if you want to count that as a war, was definitely a win. A lot of people think of the Barbary Pirates conflict as the first American war. The Americans won that one, where they basically defanged pirates that had been marauding against Europeans for like years. So Persians are indeed awesome. No, that wasn't me, Kevin. That was my doppelganger. So why are facts held from the public? What facts? I'm here to give you as many facts as possible. What do you want to know about Burkina Faso? They've got a guy who won't leave office, Traoré. We lost the Korean War, Vietnam War, Afghanistan. No. See, you're only thinking about the last 70 years, and Korea wasn't a loss, so you are wrong. I don't know. What facts can change the meaning of history? Rather than being just cynical, why don't you offer some of these facts that will change history? What's your opinion of U.S. involvement in Ukraine? I believe we should be way more involved. The United States feels an interest in helping Ukraine because of its geopolitical interest in supporting and upholding democracies, and they see Ukraine as a more democratic alternative to Russia, which is true, but a lot of people in the United States are just tired of the fighting and tired of the war. Are you a Lord of the Rings and or C.S. Lewis guy? Yeah, some of that stuff's really cool. I'm into that stuff. I mean, the movies are amazing. Do you believe that the Big Bang was real, means complete universe mass was in one point? Not sure. I wasn't there, so I can't say. After World War III, there have been 3 World Wars, rats, not 2. But after World War III, Korea and the Desert Storm would be the best 2. There are other military operations that undertook that were successful that you can't really call wars. Any comments on Israel having nukes in collaboration with South Africa? Well, the South Africans have been extremely critical of Israel's maintaining of nukes. Israel obviously has nukes. Everybody knows that they just kind of keep it quiet and they don't want to state it officially. They should definitely join the non-proliferation agreement. I mean, Iran can't have nukes, Israel can, but they don't, but they do. So that's kind of a contradiction. Let me see here. American is basically a war machine and bombs innocent and poor people. Unfortunately, that has been very true at very different points in the history of the United States. And this is not why it's this is not whataboutism, but I dare you to find a country that really hasn't had that issue of bombing either themselves or other people. How do you feel about the government killing its own citizens and solely relying on them for information? I don't know. What are you referring to? Relax. Thank you, Jen. I really appreciate that. Trying to look as sharp as possible. We just start wars to make money for the military-industrial complex nowadays. There's a lot of people who feel that way, and I understand that. I mean, this was the warning of Dwight Eisenhower in the Cold War. Yeah. It is a proxy in many ways. I hope this is not a rude question, but what do you think is the worst thing America has ever done? It's either slavery, the disposition of the Native Americans, or hot dog eating challenges. And I'm leaning towards the first two. What is your typical go-to method for studying history? Like after a Wikipedia crawl, I'll go to Wikipedia, then I'll look at the sources that are there, then I'll jump on those sources. YouTube videos are always very helpful. I love History Matters. They're a great channel here. If you like and subscribe and watch the stuff on this channel, that'd be fantastic, but this isn't the only place to do that. If you have a question, you dropped it in the chat, I will get to it as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. I think the Burkina Faso president has risen up at a difficult time for his country, but he's emerging as a dictator. It's Solomon. It's part of a new formal wear here in the channel. I've been trying to try it out, and we're finally getting around to it. Being Spanish, the American-Spanish War was the end of the Spanish Empire and started under dubious reasons. Yes, and the Americans won. Next. Was there a food shortage in Zimbabwe after the white farmer lost their lands? Yes, I've heard this before. I mean, but that's mainly because of Mugabe's government, kleptocracy. Thank you, Rats. I appreciate that. You don't have to agree with me, but you do have to listen. What do you think about Area 51 and the theories about it in Roswell? I think there's a lot of UAP or UFOs that are just government, military, industrial complex kind of stuff that's been produced, but they don't want to own up to, so they would much rather just have it be aliens. Although I do think there's a very good chance there's extraterrestrial life, and our government the American government or other governments or the world governments may know about it. Who knows? And what do you think of Rhodesia and South Africa? I believe there should have been a slower transition, especially in Rhodesia. Zimbabwe could have been a better nation if people were educated. That's something that's definitely come to be true, but retrospect is hindsight's 2020 on that one. Basically, when the Cold War got started, after the last World War, the United States put pressure on France and Great Britain to get rid of their empires so they could offer democracy and capitalism as an alternative. These places had had enough of European capitalism, so they were more sympathetic to communism. The Soviet Union knew this, so they wanted them to get rid of their empire so they could start communist revolutions. So basically, the United States and the Soviet Union put pressure on Britain and France to decolonize fast, and that led to a lot of problems. I don't know. I haven't bowled in a long time. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm only talking really fast to answer questions. I got a lot of new people I haven't seen before, so I want to answer everyone's questions. Are you familiar with the Tianxia system? No, I don't know. David, you might want to explain it to me. I probably have heard about it, but I don't know exactly what it is. Do you support free Palestine? I support freeing Palestine from Israeli occupation, from Hamas, and from the Palestinian Authority. There you go. Yes, I support freeing Palestinians who are oppressed in Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt. Or wait, they can't get into Egypt because Egypt shuts its border down when they're trying to run away from Israeli bombs. The Palestinians have gotten screwed over not just by the Israelis, but by their own governments, by terrorist organizations, and by other countries in the Middle East, and by the West. The Palestinians can't win. And oftentimes they put in people in power and have ideologies, a lot of them, not all of them obviously, that don't let them win. You may not like that, but it's true. I have to ask about your opinion about the U.S. coup in 1953. Obviously, the fear of communism spreading into a Middle Eastern country was one of the reasons the Americans caused that. Then Mossadegh got killed. Basically, MI6 and the CIA allowing that to happen so that the Shah would be more pliable. Do you think the displacement of Native Americans still have negative consequences to the state? Yes, Native Americans continue to rely on the U.S. government, and the U.S. government continues to break treaties and treat them like crap. Our spy satellites found tests of assault with South Africa. It is probably the test of Israeli nukes test. I don't know. I'm not sure. I wouldn't know as much about that. There's plenty I don't know. Afghanistan was absolutely a loss for ISAF. The entire campaign was a failure by the end of a country, literally the way it was pre-9/11. Exactly. Afghanistan's a huge loss for the Americans. Afghanistan was a loss for the USA. Yes, I said that already. Great work on being cute. Do you ever wear broad shorts in a tank? Sometimes if it's hot, usually, but we're doing formal wear now. So Africa has important rare earth minerals, diamond, gold, etc. But why are Africans poor? There's many different reasons why Africans are poor. You have the extractive, exploitative societies of the European colonizers. Then you have the abandonment of these areas by wealthy European nations that wanted post-colonial economic dependencies and relationships, but really didn't get as far as they wanted to. Also, hi, Kiara, good to see you again. But really, kleptocracies, flirting with hardline socialism and communism really didn't help them out that much. Being pawns in the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, Africa has really struggled. And now the basic idea is bureaucrats and kleptocrats are ready to steal whatever aid the West gives them, be it food or clothing or money, and use it for their own deeds. This is what happened with Mugabe and the kleptocrats in Zimbabwe, for instance. Africa is a huge continent, and there's a lot of moving and shaking in different areas of the continent, and the wealthier nations are starting to come together. Ghana, Egypt, South Africa are examples of that. Thank you for liking and subbing. I really appreciate that, Faraz. And if you're smart like Faraz, you will do the same thing. A proud Iranian is now a proud, friendly neighborhood historian. And I promise I'll get to the chat as soon as possible. Let me see. My parents were there for the transition, quite tough. It was still live in South Africa to this day, got dual citizenship with the United States, the States and our state. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that, boy. I love hearing family histories, oral histories, things like that. What do you think about the American government deploying the military on their own people under the guise of crime control? What are you referring to there? Is that referring to the National Guard being sent in, which can be done? I mean, this idea that it's never been done before, it was used to enforce segregation law. It was used to enforce desegregation laws. The National Guard can and has been used. People are just trying to say, ooh, the American government's using its military on its own people because it's Trump and they hate Trump. I'm sorry, it's been done before. Washington, D.C. is the federal district. It is the District of Columbia. It belongs to the federal government. People may not like it, but saying it's just dictatorship and fascism, like everyone wants to say, because everybody, even people who really dislike Trump for good reasons, always go to bad reasons to slam him, in my opinion. How Native Americans can be Mongoloids when they are found basically in Asia? Did they use boats? Transitions. A lot of them lived in Polynesia and Macaronesia, not just in Eastern Asia. Who were the political architects in the World War III Rhodesia era who advocated for capitalism and democracy against the Iron Curtain, the end of democracies? In the end of monarchies. I don't know who it was in Rhodesia. Who are the political architects who advocated for capitalism? Basically, the United States felt that it would be great if they could decolonize and then give them another option. The UFO topic is truly interesting and fascinating, especially after hearing the testimonies and seeing the evidence from the Nimitz case. Yeah, it just seems like there's a little more transparency on that, and the government will not give the Epstein files, but they'll give that. So, Night of the Long Knives again. How is the Night of the Long Knives? How is that just not political rhetoric that you heard on PBS? Have you seen videos of Palestinian children being groomed in UN-ran schools to hate the Jews and the Christians? Yes, I've seen that. I've also seen them struggling to run across to grab food so that they can eat. I mean, there's horrible things happening on both sides here. What about socialism everywhere in Europe? I wouldn't say that Europe is really into socialism. Social democracy seems to be popular. Large welfare states that rely heavily on taxpayers but also provide services to their people. France, Great Britain, the Scandinavian countries have been doing this for a long time. I feel for the plight of the Palestinians. They do have it bad from Israel, but everywhere they go, they are hyper-violent. They get close to overthrowing Jordan. Yep, the reason the Egyptians wouldn't let in the Palestinians from Gaza is because they were worried they would help the Muslim Brotherhood overthrow the 10 U.S. military leadership in Egypt. Let me see. Afghanistan was a win for Halliburton. Yeah, that's probably true to some extent. Yeah, hopefully your son's okay, 3. A lot of countries with socialism and capitalism mixed together do pretty well and are happy. Yep, that's the European, to an extent, that's the Scandinavian countries, Rando. I prefer to call them social democracies, but thank you for subscribing, Rats. Do you know much about the Calgary Plan? Any thoughts? Nope. And knowledge is indeed power. You're absolutely right, Rats. How do you think the collective guilt of Americans have affected American culture? True. Huh? I don't know what you mean by that. A lot of Americans feel a sense of guilt and shame because of the past actions of other Americans. I think it's a mainly Western thing. There's plenty of people from India and Iran and other places who join this channel all the time. I don't think they feel the sense of shame for their country's histories that the way the Westerners feel about their countries. So it's a uniquely Western talent to actually have a huge theory of self-critique of your nation and to hate your nation for what it's done in the past. What do you feel is the largest contribution to the decline of the dollar? Rapid spending, the inability to curtail spending is a huge reason for that. I don't know where they are, Solon. If you could find the social media handles and put them in the chat, though, that would help. From my experience living in Africa, Europe screwed them, and then lack of education led to rampant corruption and nepotism. That's a fair perspective. It's not one thing or another as to why Africa suffers. How did the Americans here feel about being on a human rights watch list? I don't talk to many USA peeps. Huh? Do you think what on Iran would be bad? I don't know what you mean. Your thought on Epstein files? I mean, some of it's coming out slowly but surely. I just think that there's been a narrative created, and I think that I don't ever expect to get everything. It would be nice to get a few things as an American who is interested in social sciences. It would be nice to hear a lot of transparency from the government. You cannot expect full transparency from a government under all circumstances, and under most circumstances not. But I would like, I mean, it'd be nice to have some of it. Nice to have some of that accountability. But yeah. Hey, Vincent, good to see you. St. Valentine's Day is inspired by St. Valentine, who was an early Christian bishop who was martyred for marrying Christian spouses in secret because the Roman Empire would not recognize them. Two wrongs never do make a right. You are correct, Gary. Thank you for watching from Israel and for subscribing. Good to see people from all over the world. I'm really curious about this question. Zionism used to lean left in America, but now it's part of a right wing. When and where did that transition happen? I think a lot of people, liberal Democrats, still tend to be Zionistic Jewish liberals, which I have a lot of familiarity with. Right-wing, the right in the United States has always been very pro-Israel. Many of them are evangelical Christians who have this end times philosophy about the importance of Israel in the economy of God. They have an affinity for the Jews, for a desire to convert them to Christianity. There is a large contingent on the far right, the Groypers group, that is just anti-Jew no matter what and thinks the Jews are doing everything. And there are a lot of people on the far left who are horrified by what's happened in Gaza and therefore have used it to broad brush Jews and Jewish supporting organizations across. And just it shows that the squeaky wheels get the grease. The loudest and most extreme groups are going to bring up the most heated ideas and get the most attention for them, unfortunately. But I wouldn't say that Zionism is a right-wing idea anymore, necessarily. Social democracy is closer to current American system than the traditional socialism and communism. It seems to be working well in Europe, and like the name, it's not that radical. Well, social democracy the Americans are far more conservative than the Europeans. The right-wing parties in Europe traditionally are the Christian Democrats in Germany or the conservatives in Britain are nothing compared to Republicans in the United States. Something to go back to with the whole Groypers far right stuff is if the Americans eventually I've said this before, if conservatives or right-wing, supposedly center-right or right-wing parties in a country do not give the right what they want, the right will create a Leviathan that is so far and more extreme than the other that it will really be controversial. And you see that with the National Front in France. You see that with the Nick Fuenteses of the world. You see that with the Reform Party. If a conservative party is not like a traditional Republican party, like you see conservative, then you see a rise. If they don't appeal to their right-wing base, then that right-wing base finds an even more extreme example to run into. Hello, Freshly, good to see you. Epstein hedge fund was 40% earned by Bernsteins, started subprime loans and swaps. Not surprising, but Epstein was involved in that. Epstein was involved in a lot of nonsense. Speaking of St. Valentine's Day in 1922, Chicago massacre was a horrible event, huh? Was anyone prosecuted for that? If you count tax evasion for Al Capone, communism isn't working. I'm English. 40 years of socialism has ruined my country. A lot of people feel that way in Great Britain right now. Even in these days, horrible events happen and no one takes accountability nor is prosecuted. Yep. And unfortunately, that happens all the time, and it's happened in history where people get away with all sorts of stuff. Marxists have allied with Islamists and LGBTQ to ruin the free Western society. It's kind of the Zohran Mandami thing going on right now in New York, very popular with the left, but also having a traditional appeal to Islam. People have had enough. A Cold War moved into the EU. What's your opinion about Trump now as Trump's first presidency? Sorry if a question has already been asked. No, that's a great question. It's interesting looking back at it as a historian who believes history is an ongoing tapestry and looks at things through the lens of contemporary history too. Trump seems to be much more of a mindset of basically, if you didn't like me during the first time, well, I'm going to double down, and you're really not going to like me this time. He doesn't care about what people think anymore, I sense, and there's a lot more of the things that my base was saying I should have done, I'm going to do. He didn't call in for instance, he didn't call in the National Guard during the George Floyd riots, and he got criticized, and Kenosha riots, and he got criticized for that by his own supporters in 2020. He didn't call in the National Guard on his own during the Capitol riot on January 6th, and obviously it almost cost him his political career. But now it's like, I'm going to call in the National Guard. And the National Guard goes into Washington, D.C., and everyone says, you should have called in the National Guard on January 6th. And he says, okay, I'll do it now. They say, no, don't do that. That's fascism. So it's a very strange development, whereas a lot of presidents tend to be a little bit more moderate and quiet during their second term. Trump is just almost on a revenge tour, I would say. It's like he's created an enemies list similar to Richard Nixon. He's obviously trying to, his attitude was after he won the first time, oh, Hillary Clinton has gone through enough sorrows and difficulties, I'm not going to prosecute her. Now he's like, I don't care, send her to prison, send Bolton, send Letitia James, send all of these people. And if you want updates about the news and information from an objective source, like a historian and a social scientist whose job it is to be objective and tell the truth, you would like my In the News segments I do every day, where I report the information going on in the United States, in the West, and throughout all the world in as objective and fair as a manner as I can. And I'm not speaking as a fan or a critic of Donald Trump. I'm only speaking as a social scientist looking at how his presidency is evolving this time. Deportations is high on his list of agendas. Everything that he said he was going to do the first time, it's like, now I have to do it. Tariffs, things like this. Things that he kind of partially did a little bit here and there during his first term, he's really going hard at this time. Let me see here. I promise I'll get to your chats as soon as I can. Like and subscribe. A super chat would be nice, but no pressure. What do you think about Dr. Thomas Sowell's conclusion about redneck culture being one of the greatest factors in holding individuals back from achieving in their own lives? It's an interesting theory. I think it's true that culture is far more predicative of different things than race, and I think that upsets everyone. People on the far left who want everything to be about race, and people on the far right who want everything to be about race in another way. A lot of people on the internet, especially now, where there's so much anonymity, want to talk about, oh, but look at this inferior group that doesn't have as good an IQ as this group. Well, there's cultural, educational, technological, and infrastructural factors as to why that is. Genetics is part of it, but when you create a system that disenfranchises people consistently, or where their culture struggles to catch up with other cultures, of course you're going to have the failure of exposure to proper amounts of reading, proper amounts of diet, things like that, horribly harm their development, educationally and mentally. So there's an example of that. Why Europeans are more progressive than Americans? I always thought if America was not two-party system, Bernie Sanders would be president by now. No. Americans are more conservative. They're more religious. Evangelical Christianity took off in America more so than it did in other parts of the West. Why West feel more guilt than outside West? There hasn't been a historiography of critique where the Mideast and the East, I feel, take a huge look at their histories, and rather than and look and say, wow, what we did was really bad and we should feel sorrowful about that. There hasn't been as much of that in the East as there has been in in America and in the West. Change the fact there are 48 million kangaroos in Australia and 3 million people in Uruguay, so all the kangaroos came to Uruguay. Every person would have to fight 16. How many could you fight? I couldn't fight one. Those things are crazy strong. In your opinion, who was the worst president during your lifetime? Ooh. It's hard. I don't like judging recent presidents. It's almost impossible. I did an entire presidential tiers list you guys should go check out. I did a Russian czars and British monarchs one, so if you want my opinions about these monarchs and these presidents, go check those out. George W. Bush right now is taking the cake simply because of the fact that it's easier for me to judge him. He's been out of office for 15 years, and the Iraq and Afghanistan war destabilized the Middle East in horrifying ways that have led to a lot of the problems nowadays, and the economy crashed when he was president. Well, will Elon Musk going to be next American president? No, he can't be. He wasn't born in America. Stephen A. Smith, that'd be an interesting presidential candidate. I think he'd be popular, but he wouldn't have enough political acumen to actually get far. And yes, thank you for my wonderful mods like Freshly, Rodolfo, and Solomon. Yes, I've forgotten a lot, but I've remembered a lot too. Adidas and Puma founders were brothers and both helped Germany with factory during World War II. You mean World War III? They were one company and separated after World War II from creative differences. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know that. Would you say that the reason the America is more religious is because the U.S. is not as urban. Yeah, there's more spread out areas. There's more of a country in many of the areas where people tend to be more conservative. Yes, that's a very good point for Oz. But do you think getting rid of the two-party system will help you, yes or no? A lot of people hate the two-party system, but a lot of people hate the coalition political governments in Germany and Israel. One of the reasons that Netanyahu is coming under such fire for allowing settlement, I don't think he's a huge fan of settling the West Bank, of sending Israeli settlers in there. But he's got to answer to the far-right parties that are putting pressure on him to do this, that believe that the Palestinians should have no land in Israel. History of Gatorade, I believe, was invented in Florida. It was invented by a professor. I'm trying to remember it. Thank you for joining, Gary. Really good to see you. Some good stuff you brought up. Thank you for joining us. And if you're like Gary and you're enjoying what you're hearing, like and subscribe. Hugo Boss designed the Nazi uniforms. That's true. Coco Chanel was a Nazi sympathizer. So was Henry Ford and Edward VIII. Thank you for joining us from London, Gary. Good day to you, mate. We are not sponsored by Crystal Geyser, at least not yet, but I love drinking it. It's good stuff. Do you think the war on Iran will make more crisis in the Middle East like it did? There's no war with Iran. It could. It would be a lot more. There's more people in Iran. It's also the largest Shia states. The Shia Muslims would be really upset if you throughout the entire Middle East. University of Florida Gators. Yep. Your thoughts on LGBTQ when they can't make a baby? What does that have to do with people being in love with someone? I mean, a lot of people think that will think that they've won a huge, major moral point when they say gay people can't make a child. The truth of the matter is, if you look at it from a historical lens, there have been gay people throughout all history, and they're very well aware of the biological limitations put upon their relationships. And again, I'm trying to make this from a historical perspective. I'm trying to be as objective and fair as I possibly can be. I'm not trying to, I mean, as a historian, you can condemn certain things, obviously, if they're bad, but that doesn't mean that you don't listen and be objective and thoughtful about everything. Your thoughts on incel who can't even have sex? We're not talking about Nick Fuentes today. I'm sorry, Uncle Incel. There's straight couples that can't have kids. That's true. Plenty of straight couples can't have kids. But by definition, a straight couple could have a child. A gay couple could never have a child. Unless, of course, you have adoption, you have IVF, you have all these other ways in which gay people could have a child. Biologically, a straight couple has the makeup to have a child. A gay couple does not. But that doesn't mean that the straight couple will always have a child, or the gay couple will never have a child. When they are 60 years old, who will look after them? If they adopt, they have friends. I mean, I understand that's a growing social concern. You also are in a natal crisis emerging, especially in the West as well as in Asia. But I mean, it's up to them to figure that out. What the heck, Nick Fuentes? Somebody asked about being an incel, so I just decided to bring up Nick Fuentes. I would love not to be an involuntary celibate. Then subscribe to this channel, learn more about history, and use it to impress women. There you go. Well, Canada and US are similar. Why Canada could have healthcare and not US? The US and Europe are really different, but I don't know why Canada is more European. Canada has been heavily influenced by both the French and the British. It was part of the British system for longer. It was still politically partially governed by the British until the 1980s, and that included the development of the National Health Institute of Health, the National Health Service, and the development of universal health care in Great Britain after the last World War. And women do love history facts. What color was Napoleon's hair? Napoleon was not French. He was Italian. He's from Corsica. He had dark brown, or I think it was black hair. Not 100% sure, but good question. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Thank you for joining us and spending your Friday here getting questions about history and social studies answered. And if you have a question, topic, or comment you want to drop about social studies, drop it in the chat and I will answer it in a timely, friendly, neighborly manner. I'm operating without my mods today, so it's been kind of crazy, but it's great to see everybody. Yes, don't you look snappy in your tie? What's the occasion? Are we talking about formal things, legal things? I feel like I'm talking to one of my cousins who are lawyers. I take the fifth. James, you're also funny. No, it's just formal wear on the channel. It's what we're doing now. Was King James actually gay? George of Villiers was the Duke of Cumberland, and he was supposedly James's lover. I don't know. James was at least bisexual. He had like 10 children. Seems like a lot of people are born out of the what? They're out of the butt these days, so maybe they can incubate a new turd in their... What the heck? Other than the fact that you wasted your time making that comment, why are you here? Napoleon was bullied as a child, and he had to use strategies to get back at the bullies, starting his training and strategy. That sounds like something about right. He was put in the military academy at a young age, and we've got a Joshua with a super chat. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Can you speak about Custer's last stand? It's my opinion that the battle could have been won had Marcus Reno attacked instead of getting up a skirmish line and ultimately retreating. Yes, Custer lost mainly because he moved too quickly. If he had waited for the backup from Reno, or allowed there was another commander general who was supposed to reinforce his position. If he had done that, then they would have been able to defeat the Sioux. But Custer wanted the glory for himself. He believed that he would be able to win the victory, and he was actually he was led around on false information from his scouts, but rather than wait for backup, he just went in guns blazing like like a very American cowboy, and obviously got decimated. And it was after Custer's defeat that the American military, which had been hesitant because some of them have had good relations with the Indians, they basically decided, no, the only good Indian is the dead Indian, a very racist, paternal thought from that time. Joshua, thank you so much for the super chat. If you do a super chat, I will give more time to your question, and I will it will probably go to the top of the line. So consider a super chat. Anything helps the channel grow. I really appreciate that. King James I of England, the sixth of Scotland, couldn't be any gayer if he tried, in my humble opinion. He was gay. He might have, but he was at least bisexual. It's hard to say that he was a homosexual and to only focus on that. Do you think after baby boomers pass away and Gen Z have more political power, America will shift more left? Yes, Gen X and millennials tend to be very liberal. Gen Z, though, is shifting hard to the right. And so it's kind of going to be interesting. Everybody felt this way, that, oh, the old adage of if you're young and liberal, then you have no heart, and if you're old and not conservative, you have no brain, that was dying away, and that the generation that voted for Obama when they were young would not become conservative, and some of them have, some of them haven't. The baby boomers, who are now the senior citizens, have become more liberal, or have just older people are dying off from the greatest generation, so the baby boomers are more liberal anyways. And it's the young people, the very younger generations, who are just now getting the right to vote, who tend to be more conservative, traditional, and religious. Buy me a drink. Oh, geez. That's hilarious, James. Nick Fuentes made the argument of geopolitics for the outcome in genetics for the outcome in people's lives. If that was true, then why do siblings have different outcomes in life? That's a Sowell line from 2006. Because Nick Fuentes has not read Thomas Sowell. And he hasn't read any of the other great sociologists, thinkers, or economists of his day. And he probably wouldn't read Sowell because he hates black people. But then again, who knows how much of it? He had an interview with Candace Owens, so I don't know. I hear people really, really glazing folks like that. There's a lot of appeal to that. There's a lot of disenchanted people, especially young men in Western society. But a lot of them do not really want to make a race-based social Darwinist argument from the late 19th century, early 20th century, that certain races are just predisposed to be better. And that's just completely untrue. It was untrue then, it's untrue now. What are the current Georgian protests all about? I don't know. Is it about getting independence from Russia? Because they could use that. Andrew Jackson was and died with a bullet still in his body from a battle. He also was the first president to ever be shot at, but the gun misfired. Napoleon was a tin god and usurper and upstart like the little Corsican. The little Corsican who almost conquered all of Europe. Thoughts on anime from a historical perspective? It's actually got a huge social influence. It's obviously part of Japanese art, and animation became popular in the late 20th century, but really became popular with millennials in America and the West, thanks to movies like Studio Ghibli was obviously a big part of it. My Neighbor Totoro, or was it My Friend Totoro? Obviously huge parts. Just shows how artistic movements can shape historical, social, and cultural norms. And now weeaboos and popularity amongst non-Japanese, non-Asian peoples for anime and manga has become huge in the United States. Do you believe Sir Isaac Newton never scored with a woman, or did he die a virgin? I don't know. Is he your inspiration? I tend to believe that most people in history who say that they're virgins aren't virgins. It's just cool to think, oh, this person went their whole life without having relations. Napoleon ran wherever he went. They sent him to an island and he established an army, navy. Yep. At first it was all for the sake of the Republic, then it was all for the sake of Napoleon. Base Zoomers going right wing. I've heard this before. King James I, most powerful and probable male lover, was George Villiers, the first Duke of Buckingham, not Cumberland, who rose to immense power and influence through his close relationship with the king. And then they assassinated him afterwards because they were so sick of him. Your thoughts on the Illuminati? I think a lot of people want there to be an organization that exists that holds huge dominant power. The Templars, the Freemasons, the Bilderbergers, the the Bohemian Grove, these people. And there's some truth to it that there's probably secret societies where people share information and ideas and make backroom deals that they won't talk about in public, but that affect people's lives. I'm sure there's some truth to this. Maybe something that wouldn't look so savory on the front of the New York Times is a backroom deal made at one of these meetings. I just don't know how much power and influence they have directly over things. Didn't the king send like 4 armies to defeat him when he came back to France and they all joined him? Yep. He literally opened up his jacket, and it's probably my favorite historical story, and said, "I am your emperor, will you strike me?" And they did not strike him. What were all the causes of the Salem witch trials, and how long did the trials last? Overblown frustration, fear of diseases, and ignorance about diseases, associating everything with the devil's constant presence, kind of a Calvinist overreaction, and then, like the name implies, a witch hunt where you're basically targeting your opponents. I believe this is the same family that James I's grandson Charles II had an intimate relationship with. She eventually became the Duchess of Cleveland. I've heard that. Charles II had so many lovers. So you think America will continue to shift right, or will there be a left turn at some point? And also that about demographic shift. If white people become minority, what will cause shift to left? I don't know. It's weird. America is strange in the way that it keeps an equilibrium. It would have looked 10 years ago like Republicans were and the right were in real danger of falling off, but the voter registration numbers, demographic shifts are all helping them now. It's strange. And of course, there's also this idea of redistricting. There's the idea of counting the census, not counting illegals, banning immigration, mainly illegal immigration, preventing people who may be more sympathetic to Democrats who have been more sympathetic to immigrant issues. And yes, those are our social media. Solomon put it in the chat. Kind of, but thank you. Sorry, phone battery went. I was wondering how Americans feel like being on a human rights watch list. What do you mean by that? Why people want to believe in secret societies? Because it helps them explain things in the middle, and people love to blame their problems on someone else. The Rockefellers are definitely one of them too. Why do people hate the Rockefeller and Rothschilds? I can tell you why people hate the Rothschilds, but people hate anyone who has, whether they're Jewish or not, hate many people and many groups who have such seemingly a huge amount of wealth, a continual line of political and social influence, and basically control everything. And Rockefeller did a lot of horrible, nasty stuff. He mistreated his workers. He's one of the robber barons for a reason. Salem witch trials might have been caused by eating moldy bread. Yeah, I think it was more epilepsy, that the first couple of girls had epilepsy and it was just easier to blame a slave woman for their problems. Did the queen have Princess Diana killed? I don't think so. Were there widespread causes of hysteria and similar witch-like trials during the Black Plague? Yes. Basically, Europe throughout the 14, 15, and 1600s were having these. The Americans didn't just develop it on their own. These witch trials were much worse and much more chaotic in Europe. Fun fact, James I wrote a book about witchcraft, and Shakespeare added the witches to the beginning of Macbeth. Yes, watch my video on Macbeth to learn the real story of the real Scottish king and his association with James VI of Scotland. The same guy who became James I of England and then helped write and then commissioned the writing of the King James Bible. Napoleon must have struck primal fear into Europe. He just couldn't be beaten. Yes, but not the Russians. Hello, Salinger. Good to see you again. Historically, people who do well for themselves have been hated on. Yeah, there's a lot of envy and frustration and hatred. Why adult content free 24/7 and doctor's online consultation is not free? Good point. Actually, he actually did in Russia. His campaign was a disaster. He got close. I can understand why Napoleon, I will go to my grave believing that Napoleon had good reason to attack the Russians because they allied with Britain, they broke the Treaty of Tilsit, and he actually had the advantage. It made sense for him to attack, just like Barbarossa made sense. The invasions of Russia and the Soviet Union by Napoleon and then the Nazis actually kind of made sense. They obviously just backfired because the Russians had a lot more power and gumption than their enemies thought. The U.S. was added to Civics Monitor watch list. Why were they added to that? You grew up in Salem, so you probably have seen some of those ancient homes, like the Giles Corey home and stuff like that. At the end of the day, I think 20 people were killed. Not all of them were burned at the stake. One man had a bunch of stones put on his body, and it was called planking, and that's how he died. Any thoughts on by Sir Francis Galton and his sons? No, don't know it. Napoleon lost, same as Hitler, war on two fronts and fought Russia in the winter. Never fight Russians in the winter. Yep. It did make sense for Hitler. Where are you going to expand? Where's your Lebensraum? You're not going to be able to go anywhere else, and your main political enemy is the communists. Fiefdom versus serfdom. Fiefdom is the ownership of a particular land or area that serfs would usually work on. Russia is the death of empires. So is Afghanistan. Just ask the U.S. Yeah, it made sense, NC. If Hitler hadn't invaded in Barbarossa, he would have won. Yes, that's true. But it made sense to expand his living space and take on his political enemies. He was proud of his accomplishments, and he had accomplished quite a bit. What he didn't pay attention to was the Winter War and how well the Russians fought. The Nazis planned on moving Russian soil back to Germany, but the Cold War. Yep. Nelson and David Rockefeller worked with Kissinger to open up the CCP via Nixon. Yep. Changed the entire geopolitical sequence of the late 20th century. Elon Musk said that we are living in a simulation. Your thoughts on it? I just don't believe it. If we are, then so what? We would never know. I hate that argument. We're living in a simulation. Basically kind of a complex solipsism. How would I ever know? That doesn't make any sense. Ideology versus realism have to be logical and more. That's true. There would be no games of chess if the powers refuse to play. War is stupid. Yes, but it's also stupidly necessary in many cases and will continue to be stupidly necessary for a lot of people. So here's some history for you. The death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus was foretold hundreds of years in detail before it happened. By who? Oh, Isaiah 53. That is not a Jewish interpretation of that passage. It's a Christian interpretation of that passage. The Jews do not see Isaiah 53 as Jesus at all. So why was the rapid industrial... But I will say the Jews who followed Jesus clearly did. Paul and Peter, for instance, who were both Jewish leaders who became Christians. Kind of. Peter wasn't a Jewish leader, but whatever. I've played Civilization. I like Empire Earth and Rise of Nations more. So why was rapid industrialization a good thing for Russia? Also, did it have costs? It's what allowed them to defeat the Nazis was the rapid industrialization, and it had horrible costs the way Stalin basically forced people out off of farms, collectivization, and everything. Because of restrictions on liberty from Trump, restrictive executive orders, unjustifiable institutional cutbacks, and intimidation through threatening. Not surprised at all that that's the case, Rando. Trump has never been a fan of international communities and never cared what they had to say about certain things or being put on watch lists for that. I think it's for many Americans, it's embarrassing. Thoughts on Stalin? Obviously, one of the most brutal dictators in human history, doesn't get the attention enough because he was a contemporary of Hitler, and Hitler is so maniacal and so genocidal and so awful that he obviously gets the bulk of the attention of dictators in the 20th century. But in a century that gave you 3-4 dozen dictators, then there's not enough attention given to Stalin. I understand, but he did not have the supplies to do it for the number of men. Yes, he did. The Soviets almost completely capitulated and fell apart. It was only the winter. It was only being able to stall the advance, barely. Stalin, basically, a lot of people felt he was dead because it was so bad. It's the correct interpretation of Scripture. I don't know. That's a back and forth issue. I'm not a biblical scholar, so I can't speak to that. Why America wants trade to happen using dollar? Because the dollar is the American currency, the same way the Indians want the rupee to be used in trade, I'm sure. Or BRICS currency. Do you know Yukimura Sanda, hero of Edo period? The Edo period is the Tokugawa shogunate. I know a little bit about that, but I don't know who Yukimura Sanda is. Talmudic Jews say Jesus is in hell. Yes, some Talmudic Jews. Most Jews don't really follow that part of the Talmud, but there are some really harsh anti-Christian rhetoric in the Talmud. Most of it written during the times when Christians were persecuting Jews ad nauseum. There's harsh language about, Muhammad was the first one to call the Jews vermin. Harsh language about religions is a common thing, and the Talmud, it's kind of shocking being a Westerner, being in a Christian society to hear that, but it's not. I've known about it for a while. Let me see. What do you think about the Mexican president shielding the cartels? I don't know if it's fully true. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. He could not keep his supply line. His army was ill-equipped. Not the Nazi army. It was dependent on blitzkrieg, and the Russians actually beat the blitzkrieg. But it was close. It was really close, NC. Yes, and that's the correct interpretation. The nation of Israel have been spiritually blinded by God himself, according to Acts of Romans as well. Again, that's a common Christian interpretation. It helped them explain the destruction of a temple by the Romans and the geopolitical shift and the rise of Christianity while Judaism got decimated and the Jews eventually lost their homeland in 136. Let me see. The USSR was so silly. Think about how cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin fell into the field of what was essentially a serf woman. Yep, that's basically how they were. It was a feudalistic society with technological imperatives to destroy their enemies. You know about how the U.S. in 1946, U.S. pushed for more political freedom in Iran? You think that makes 1953 coup less bad or no? No, still bad. Churchill quote on alienance with Stalin to fight Hitler. Alliance to catch a demon, one must cut a deal with the very devil. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. And he knew that he had been predicting how bad the Soviets were for a long time. Have you heard the cake story? Germany intercepted a cake meant for U.S. soldiers, and they knew then they would lose because we had strong shipping lines that the cake was still fresh. Not surprising to me. It's kind of a funny one. Is it true that the percentage of Christians in the U.S. dropped from 95 to 61? Yes. Do you know about the Janissary who founded the village of Moena? Yes, I've heard about that. He was supposedly a young Christian man. Many of the Janissaries were emasculated and castrated by the Ottomans. And then he went to Italy and founded his own town. And many Janissaries were able to rise up into high ranks in the Ottoman Empire, despite them being from European Christian origins. Mexican governments get a lot of money from the cartels, so does our government. You mean the American one? I'm not shocked. Let me see. Hello, Salinger. So Christians will likely be a minority in the U.S.? I don't know. It all depends. It could be. That's the way it's headed. Do you think that Kim Jong-un can fight? I think he wants to fight. He's trying to work with China to build up nuclear proliferation in Asia. He obviously is interested in a renewed front in South Korea. It's an interesting point. I've been saying this for a year and a half now, ever since I've been doing these live streams, basically, because people want to know if we're going to go to World War III. First of all, there was already a World War III. The 7 Years' War was the first World War. You can watch my video on it here on the channel. Then you have World War II is the Great War, and World War III is the war with the Nazis and the Japanese. However, what is fascinating is, so if World War IV were to happen, it seems like we're either at a point where it could easily happen, or it's not going to happen at all. One fell swoop, one Russian invasion of Poland, one Chinese attack on Taiwan, one Korean invasion into South Korea and Japan, is Iran attacking Israel in a surprise attack, Iran using a nuclear weapon. But there seems to be ticking off a little bit, and we're heading a little bit away from that. Yeah, I'm still here. We go an hour. We just got over an hour, rats, but I'm glad you're back. The Constitution is not a suicide pact. That's true. Hello, Yuda Buddha. Good to see you as always. Did America employ camels from Mideast during its civil war? I've heard of that. I don't know if it's fully true. The British used them, I know. Should fight Trump in the octagon. That'd be kind of funny. Like at the 2026 UFC 250th anniversary, that'd be funny. Islam is looking like a contender in the U.S. Just look at what they've done to the European Union. Islam's rising, and it's because of birth rates, and it's rising in the West. Could India and China team up and become a dominant superpower? Yes, China's already well on their way. Can I post my Henry Danger X the Funderman's erotic fan fiction here? No. This is a history channel. How's the 7 Years' War World War? You had fighting in India, you had fighting in Africa, you had fighting in North America, you had fighting in Europe. Where else do you get fighting like that? You have the Spanish and Portuguese, you have the giant empires, you have the British, you have India, you have the Americans. It has everything a regular war does. What is Kim Jong-un's ultimate goal? Just extreme isolationism and family rule for eternity? I think it's nationalism and retaking South Korea. Why do they all want... I think he legitimately believes that they are the greatest nation in the world. I think he's deluded himself into believing that. Why do they all want to invade each other? Kim is sitting in a mansion, living his best life. Why start a war that makes no sense? Because a lot of rich and powerful people are bored and want more wealth and more power. Talk about Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller once said, how much more money is enough? He said, $1 more than I currently have. Yeah. Yes, Jonathan, I am clear. Didn't you come in earlier, say a stupid insult, leave, and then come back to just do another stupid insult? Are you that bored with your life? Obviously, you're protesting a little bit too much. You must really like it here. I see a lot of Muslims becoming more westernized and being more liberal. Do you see this happening in the majority anytime soon? A lot of it's common with any immigrant family where the children tend to be a little bit less observant. But grandchildren of immigrants tend to be more observant of their grandparents' culture, of the homeland's culture, than of the land. So you have an immigrant family, they come to the United States, it's usually the United States. The children are taught, you learn English, you develop these skills, you become American. They do that, and then their children are more like, no, we want to speak Italian. We want to learn about our Irish heritage. We want to practice Greek Orthodoxy. All of these things that their parents that their parents were kind of drilled into. No, you become as waspy as you can, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That's true. It's just another Balkans war that turned into a world conflict. They didn't expect it to be that bad, just like the Civil War. Whenever they say the war's not going to be that bad, it's going to be that bad. Is there any good example of an authoritarian regime following and transitioning towards democracy? Because revolution and war often makes things worse. I just want to know. It's tough. I don't know. It's hard for an authoritarian regime. I mean, the Nazis, because of European micromanaging and American intervention, West Germany became a democracy. I want an honest answer. Based off our population size in the U.S., which group would breed first if relationships keeps happening between blacks and whites? What? I don't even know how to answer that, which means I'm not going to. I'll never understand that, maybe because I'm not rich, but even if I was, I would think 100 million is comfortable. Fair? It's not that they are bored. They need to keep us in constant battle within ourselves. I don't think the North Koreans have that big of a seat at the table. Didn't Rockefeller donate the site for the UN building in New York? Yep. I think his son did. I think it was his son. It's because the grandparents are nicer to the grandchildren. Possibly. Grandchildren are looking for an identity. Should Jerome Powell be fired? He's kind of covering his rear with Trump right now. I mean, he just went and said that basically he's anticipating the possible rate cuts to the Fed. The Dow gained 850 points because of that. Just because he's like, yeah, maybe in September we'll cut rates. I mean, if that happens, I don't know. The American economy could be unleashed, but the fear about inflation is a real problem. But I think there's a very good chance now that he cuts rates in September. I think a lot of it is just to keep his job. Jerome Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve. And you also have somebody under investigation by the Trump administration for mortgage fraud in the Federal Reserve. So it's kind of iffy. Powell knows he needs to toe a line. Hey, I have a question. I want to know which parent passes on more genes for IQ to the offspring. Which race scores lower on IQ tests? How could this potentially be fixed in generations? Help. Literally something I already answered. Typically, races that tend to do better on IQ tests tend to have all the educational, ideological, and cultural indicators of success. They read to their children at a younger age, they expose them to more materials, they have the generational wealth to be able to do those things, and then the kids, when they start to develop, they test them on IQ, and then people like you go and say that it's all race. It's not all race. There are obviously trends over generations tend to imply a certain swoop with generations. Africa has some of the lowest IQ test results, and one of the reasons for this is lack of infrastructure, proper education, and proper access to materials. It's far more cultural. If they didn't have a seat at the table, they would have been annihilated by now. Okay. Ford is paying awesome dividends now. I've heard that. Walmart had a good quarter too. Well, I was told West Germany was an exception. Iraq and Libya are proof of it. Yeah, the Middle East has not been, in Africa, I got to go charge my phone. They are not big fans of democracy. This is the failure of American foreign policy in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Vietnam to some extent, because some areas of the world just are not programmed for democracy. And the United States had to learn in a very hard and unpleasant way that caused a lot of suffering that that's okay. Leave it alone has been more of the attitude recently. That's why neo-isolationism is popular. I'm almost done with the live stream. I don't think I'm going to go over to Instagram. I've gone over 10 minutes here, almost 10 minutes. What's the probability of Black Americans being the true Israelites of the Bible? Almost zero. Same as European whites and American whites being the true Israelites of the Bible. Trains built America, and now we spit on them. Yes, air travel is quicker, but TSA sucks and sleeper trains. Trains are a very underrated invention, and you can't have cars, you can't have planes without trains. How old am I? I'll let you guess. A lot of thick people of every race? Okay, then. I guess if you were born mega rich, you have 10 cars, 5 houses, 3 boats, then you get like 25, probably you're a bit bored. Yeah. Hit the like button, please do. Smoke some, yeah. You go ahead and do that. I'll have a cigar instead. Was it the federal government's moral duty in the 2008 financial crisis to bail out the big too big to fail big juggernauts? I don't think there's a politician alive today who would advocate for that. I just don't. Just shows you how quickly politics can change a society. That was 15 years ago. Or if Yeltsin in 1999, then Putin in 2001, both inquired about joining NATO. So why the current war in Ukraine? Because NATO was, Putin especially, realize that NATO was created to hold back the Russians, and the designs of NATO are to encumber the Russians, and the Russians are always fearful of the invader, so Ukraine being part of NATO means the invaders are at the gates. If you want eugenics, don't do it from race. Do it for who doesn't bald. Well, that might very well be me. I'm told that if I get to a certain age and I'm not thinning, that I'm going to be a silver fox, so there you go. Black Hebrew Israelites believe that they are the true Israelites and that the 12 tribes of Israel are people of color. Yep, they are not. What do you think of the post-USSR countries, post-USSR terms of capitalism and crony capitalism? Seems like they never recovered from their communism to this day. It's hard. Again, the Russians are not extremely democratic either. Yes, so you love roaches and joints, rats. That's not a cigar. Does IQ determine culture, or does culture determine IQ? Both. It's cyclical. I believe countries get it wrong with trying to emulate the Americans' way. Different cultures produce different outcomes. Exactly. And America has just emulated amalgamation of Angloid and Western societies. I'm drinking Obolon beer from Kiev, whatever it is tonight. Yep, that sounds fun. I'd like some of that beer. Since Trump returned to office in 2024, popularity of MAGA rise or decline. It's declined a little bit. Parties in power often get such a huge amount of criticism. But I do think the movement's still pretty strong. Even with the Epstein files, even with the bombing of Iran, even with people who are hardcore isolationists and stuff like that, thinking Trump hasn't done exactly what he said he was going to do. Oops. There's a lot of people who still really love Trump and what he's doing. A lot of people still really admire him. And I don't know that he's won a lot more supporters since he came to power, but I think people have just kind of realized that, like it or hate it, MAGA is just here to stay in the United States. What's your favorite movie? Oh, I've got so many. Favorite and best are not the same. The Indiana Jones movies are definitely some of my favorites. Trump is the most hated president so far. 40% like, 55% dislike. Okay, let's see. Okay, are we finally back? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me okay? No, it was not something you wrote. I was just simply saying that polls are not always reliable when determining a leader's popularity. Trump has always been underestimated by the polls, and there's a lot of polls that say otherwise. It's kind of a back and forth thing. I saw somebody commenting on groceries. That's obviously a huge issue for him. He did not get the things he said he was going to get done in a day because he's an exaggerative, hyperbolic blowhard sometimes. So, yeah. Anyways, do you agree that liberalism and democracy are human values and not Western values? Is it just because of... No, I don't believe that all humans orient themselves towards democracy. Hegel was wrong. He had one chance and he blew it. People are very skeptical of him, the way he acted about the files. I don't know about that. I mean, some people are, but there's diehard people who will support him no matter what. Yes, I really don't care. And people making fun of Trump's appearance and people saying not to do that should recognize that Trump has made fun of almost everyone's appearance ever since he came to office. So all's fair in love and war, I guess. The problem with Trump's opposition tends to be that his opposition tries to mimic him, and then they just look just as bad as he does. But it's even worse when you're copying somebody who's already acting like a jerk. Like, why do you want to copy somebody who acts like a jerk? You got a honey, oh, geez. Hello, Weston Doll. Is Poland European, Russian, Baltic, kind of a mix of everything? A mix, but definitely more European. Why people blame men for Trump winning when 45% of women voted for him? More men voted for him than women. Trump is very much a troll. That's part of it. And he actually gets away with it because we're just kind of used to it. He's desensitized not just the United States, but most of Western culture to his rampages. The attorney that represented 200 victims of Epstein, Bradley Edwards, says that Trump was the only person to give verifiable information. I don't think he has anything to do with the Epstein files. I don't think he's on them. I don't think he's hiding anything. I really don't. Maxwell said today that he wasn't on it. Barr said he wasn't on it. A bunch of people who are not even sympathetic to him said he wasn't on it. Obviously, the question is, who is he protecting politically? Is he protecting anyone politically? What the heck is his reaction? It hasn't been a popular reaction even from his base. So, yeah. I see SMC, you're allowed to believe that. You're allowed to say that. But actually, I shouldn't have deleted that. Oops, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to delete that. But the truth of the matter is... I just don't see, I think that if he had done that, we would have known about it a lot sooner because people made up a story about him colluding with the Russians So if they're willing to make up a story to destroy him, and they have a real story that's even worse, why not just use that story? So I didn't see your question about Peter Thiel. Let me see here. Yep, could be rando. Populist left. The populist left was rising with Bernie Sanders, not just Mamdani. Let me see here. Maybe he's protecting national security. It's possible. You can't be fully transparent. It'd be nice to get some transparency, but if we get 50% of transparency on the Epstein files, that'll be more. That'll be a gift. Never look the gift horse in the mouth. That'll be more than anyone in America expected. He's certainly protecting someone, and that someone isn't a Dem, because if it was just that, it'd be perfect political game to release it. Yeah. I don't know. Is it allies? Is it political opponents? Is this a 4D chess match? I just don't know. There's just so much behind the scenes. I'm not sure. I just think that it's a very bad argument to go from Trump as being shady about releasing the files, which is certainly obviously verifiably true, to Trump is on the files and did horrible things to children. That's a conclusion. It's a false one. Yeah. Chris Tucker was on the flight list and admitted to flying on the plane, but to Africa for a donation event. Yes, not all went. Yes, it's true, and not everyone who's part of it is going to be guilty. Maxwell said Bill Clinton didn't go to the island, so who knows? Do you have any prediction about 2028? Right now, as it stands, as a social scientist looking at everything, and we're going to wrap up in a couple minutes. Hopefully we get a couple more questions about history, but I do like talking about geopolitics as long as it's historical. I think Trump has that Andrew Jackson momentum, and I think Vance will be his Martin Van Buren. I think right now it's way too early, but if I had to predict, I think Vance becomes the next president. Do you really believe Trump knows Epstein for 15 years all the time and he didn't know about the BFF island? He didn't own the island before Trump then. He even said, like me, women, younger side. Yeah, I don't know what that means. So what does it mean? What does that younger side comment mean? The island, Epstein did not own the island until after he knew Trump. Trump stopped flying before he even bought the island. Trump kicked him out of there's back and forth. There's obviously some sort of palling around that's pretty disingenuous, but there's also, of course, some issues that are, where were their relationships? Trump had stopped flying on his plane by the time he had the island, for instance, stuff like that. I think he's probably on the list, but we can't verifiably tie that to any action with kids on the island. Yes, that he is on the list. He's been confirmed to be on the list, but the capacity indicts, as so far as we know, the official story, which I know a lot of us don't want to believe, is he hasn't done anything. It's obviously a Mossad thing. Ehud Barak was in there. Seems like a Mossad method. That's a possibility, and maybe Trump doesn't want to compromise Israel as a satellite ally in the Middle East. That's a possibility. Thank you, history question. What is your favorite historical event? There's so many good ones. That's a great one. It's hard for me to pick one particular historical event that I like more than ever. One that several stand out. The building of St. Petersburg, Napoleon returning to power by risking his life to do so. Obviously, the Allies defeating the Nazis. The fall of the Berlin Wall gives me chills every time I watch the clip of people in Berlin. The I Have a Dream speech. Okay, let me ask you. I'm an Iranian and I have a green card. Should I be worried for deportation? If you're a permanent resident in the United States, no. From what I know, you should not be. And he stopped being friends with him and better. Yeah, everyone's just going to go back and forth. I've already given a possibility, but yeah. A felon cannot vote. Felon became president. Depends on the type of felon. Some felons are allowed to rehabilitate. That's kind of an exaggeration. What do you know about the Chinapas that were invited to the Aztecs to feed their massive population? Is this the story of the people that they used to cannibalize? The Aztecs cannibalized, practiced human sacrifice, did all sorts of things. There was a chief whose daughter was taken and skinned and used so that she could be released into a godly form, and then the priest wore her skin as a pelt, and the chief was brought back and saw this horrible tragedy. The Aztecs were not good people. Very, very violent, bellicose, and destructive society. Children crusades, exaggerated, done in the early 13th century, never even made it anywhere. Democracy is Western value. Why don't Japan and India could pull it off regularly? I think it's Western in many of its origins, but it's not only Western. Could I beat history, and why isn't there a herstory? History, I think it comes from the ancient Latin word for stories. Oh my God, yeah, the 100 Days in France feels like a movie. True. What do you think about of that show Aliens? Any concrete arguments made there in terms of? I just don't think so. Why do I always? I'm sleepy now because I've been going for 80 minutes. How do you feel about the Qin dynasty? Positive or negative? Definitely positive in solidifying China as an imperial power. Definitely negative in how repressive Qin Shi Huang was. What is the best way to learn English? Talking and communicating and working with other people who speak it on a regular basis, who are willing to listen and correct, but not judge. The growing beds formed in the rivers that rival today agricultural output. Okay. Your opinion on Shah of Iran? I think things in the Middle East would be better if a Shah was still had to stay in power. I don't think the Shah was a good person. I think every time it's not that you replace, it's who you that has had a dictator. Some of them have been. When you have replaced them in the Middle East, you have gotten some bad blowback. What's one interesting thing about Titanic that you know? It was advertised as unsinkable, but the captain and no one on the crew ever said it was unsinkable. It was the makers never said it was unsinkable. What is one interesting thing about? I already said that. Let's see. Watch baby cartoons. That's a good one to do it. Yep. Zikpe Totek. Yep. Do you think the world would be a better place if it was under a single ruler or a single nation? Probably not. I mean, that's what the Nazis were trying to do, and they didn't even get all through it. What was your message? You're so wrong. Epstein was doing it since the 90s, and he bought the island. Well, Trump and Epstein. Okay, so they broke up in 2004. But I'm talking about. I misspoke. I was talking about the flights there, and yes, Epstein was doing that who knows what he was doing in the 90s. The Amazon is pretty fascinating too. So many secrets there. Yes, beautiful river, fascinating societies there. The Incas were a latecomer there. We all think of the Incas as the natives, but the Incas didn't emerge until the 15th century. No, Damien, you first. Hello, James Monroe. One of my favorite presidents has entered the chat right at the time we're about to end. How can I be handsome like you? I don't know. I guess friendly history like Sidney Sweeney has good genes. What was the real reason for the Gulf War in 91? Stopping Saddam, making sure that the oil doesn't get taken, because that's good old American oil, if you know what I mean. Do you know anything about the Qatari warriors? Not off the top of my head. Do you have any questions for us? Why haven't you liked and subscribed or told all your friends and family? No ideas need to be tested. If you only have one idea, how can you judge the outcome of those ideas? Fair point. Friendly history. Oh, you're Hars. You think I could transfer my mod to here? You literally recreated yourself as James Monroe. Okay, come back tomorrow and we'll talk. Is it possible Egyptians were latecomers and also most structures are older? Some of them are. Some of the megaliths are older, but the Egyptians... I mean, you have 1,500 years at least to develop civilizations in the Middle East before the Egyptians, so... The Incas didn't have an empire until the 15th century. Yeah, my point is there's no way Trump at least didn't know about Epstein trafficking kids, and there's a high chance he did assault kids. No. The first part, possible. Second part, Trump testified in one of the trials against him. I think if this was something that was obvious to us, we would have known about it a long time ago. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it's not completely impossible, but it seems very unlikely. Wait, you've got two accounts and they're both here, Hars? Why didn't you just join with your regular account? Do you agree with Canada becoming 51st state? It's just typical bravado and Trump trying to get things that he wants. Canada and him are finally working together, though, I hear, so that's interesting. I believe Tariq bin Zayed was a Berber. And the Moors wanted nothing more than to control the Berbers, and the Berbers weren't willing to let them do that. That's the thing. There was a lot of people who felt that President Trump bombing in Iran was violation of the War Powers Clause. It was an invasion of a sovereign nation. The SEAL Team 6 operation was opposed by Vice President Joe Biden for that very reason in 2011. Any knowledge of genocides between Homo sapiens that were documented before society started documenting? Oh my goodness, that's a tough one. Killing and warfare were common. I don't know if you could call it quite a genocide. The large scale wasn't as possible. Okay. Yeah, let me see here. So anyways, YouTube wants my ID on the account, and I'm not giving doxable info to the Chinese YouTube secret underground government. You mean the government that pays me? Oh, geez, Hars. Okay. we'll talk about your James Monroe moderating status. But you did make a TikTok for me, so China knows who you are. Believe me. Anyways, okay. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. We're going to wrap up. We went 26 minutes over just to get all of your questions answered. Some of you, it's first time. Some of you, great to see people like Rando, Corzo, Gaia Han, as always. Got to do this on the street. That'd be fun. Where did Corona come from? China. Why he gets triggered when he asked about Trump? Oh, LOL. We all know Trump. We all know Trump. Don't give a about anyone enough to ruin his reputation for him possibly losing voters. Okay. Yes, I clearly got triggered. I clearly just started yelling and screaming at you like people on the internet. I don't know. You're allowed to have your opinion about Trump, and there's plenty of people who have opinions and have valid criticisms. My thing that tires me out is not just Trump fatigue syndrome, which all Americans have because they're sick and tired of hearing this guy sometimes, but it's also the fatigue and frustration that people have because I think a lot of people are fatigued from Trump derangement syndrome. People who just will pick on anything to attack him no matter what, even when the arguments aren't that good, like the Epstein argument. So yeah, sorry, smiley face or whatever your name is, but I mean, I'm not getting triggered about that. I just don't agree with you. I think you're getting triggered because you don't like my responses. If religious theology creationism is true, then isn't everyone related? To some extent, that would be true. Speaker's Corner. Oh, for goodness sake. Qatari warriors are Indo-Aryans who were part of the Punjabi military dating back 3,000 years ago. Interesting. So that's like the Indo-Aryan invasion. Was there warnings available before 9/11 happened or not? There was an indication, but nobody took it seriously. Not you, I meant Trump. He gets really triggered when reporters asked him about it. That's true. He hasn't acted very innocent. I will say that. I think he is innocent, but I don't think that he's acted very innocent. I think there's a lot of layers to this, and I think his explanations haven't been good. I mean, they are finally releasing them, and he hasn't said, no, don't release it, don't do that. They just started releasing documentation. They released the Maxwell transcripts. So I think that he started off handling it poorly. His administration's gotten a little better at handling it, but it is a mark against him. A lot of people are, like you are, kind of interested in. Yeah, that's true. He does act sus. And every politician smells like sulfur. Good one. What did you think of him as a philosopher? Overrated for his time? I think that's the guy who died by laughing. If you die by laughing, you are not overrated. I do my best, Yuda. Thank you for asking your questions. And that's going to be our last question. Don't you agree CCP wants our information to sell data to the despotate with Russia and the Democrat Party? No! Okay, last question answered. Good. Harsh got a nice, firm answer. And if you talk about getting triggered, there's me getting triggered. That's the best I can do for getting triggered. My eyes get big and I just say, no, because no, that's just nonsense in my opinion. Anyways, sorry, Harsh. You're going to have to convince me on that one. You won't, but you can try. All right. Sure. Do foreign entities like accumulating data? Yes. Does that mean we're all going to suffer because of it? Probably not. Okay, so... All right, take care. Have a great rest of your Friday. If you're forced to say no, blink twice. There you go. I blinked 3 times to show that you're wrong. Okay, see you guys hopefully tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us and for a great live stream. As always, love history, and bye-bye now. Lectures on Sunday. You guys get to vote on that.